So I don't know about you guys, but every time I try and sell a piece of gear, I'm always kind of nervous about it because it's either you have to sell it online or you have to go to a camera shop and you're probably not going to get that much. And so finally, I think there may be a solution to it. Gear Up is an app dedicated to photographers and videographers for selling and buying gear. So I'm stoked on it, gonna give them a try out. Probably gonna put my Mavic Pro up for sale because this just came in the mail. So we just got to the park. I'm super stoked to try out the Mavic Air 2. It's a really nice day, not too hot out. So let's get the drone in there and see what kind of shots we can get. So I gotta say, one of the features I'm most excited about to test out on the Mavic Air 2 is the HDR video. On my Mavic, it only has just, the dynamic range that it has. So having HDR video can make a big difference, especially on a bright day like this, where you can see the sky detail and then a lot of the shadow detail. So I'm excited to try that out. It's pretty easy to set it up. My only concern so far is how big this remote is. I don't know how I feel about that yet. It's really responsive and so smooth. So right now we're in 4K 24, and just to test the drone, I have it on auto settings just to see what the drone thinks is best. And just on my phone, the dynamic range looks super nice right now. Okay, now we're gonna do some filming and we're gonna test the HDR video, which already without it looks really good. So I'm really curious on what that's gonna look like. Only drawback I just noticed though is you can't use manual settings, which I guess makes sense because it's filming two different exposures at the same time. So I guess you can't control that. So we'll definitely see how it looks on the computer later. And I know I mentioned that this remote is huge because it is, but it feels so much better. The fact that your phone goes on top now versus the handles being on the side of the phone always felt kind of weird, but the bigger remote feels a lot nicer. It's just like a video game controller. I'm digging that. So the stabilization looks really nice. There's no jitters on the gimbal or anything. But also, the fact that the horizon hasn't been lost once is a big plus to me. I feel like drones and especially gimbals are really notorious for that, where you'll easily lose the horizon. That happens with my Mavic a lot too. But this one, so far flying it, the horizon stays locked 100%. So far, I have not lost the image once, and I kind of flew a distance away, and that's the whole point of this giant remote, is to be able to transmit the image farther away. So I think that's a major plus, and I'm willing to have a big remote for that. Apparently you can do a flight time of up to 34 minutes. That's really impressive, and we've been flying it now I think maybe like 5-10 minutes, and it's still at 76%, so that's pretty impressive. Okay, so now we're gonna get on the one wheel and test out this 4K 60 option. And I'm gonna have my friend Taylor, who's been filming most of this video for me. So he's gonna be flying the drone. I'm gonna get on the one wheel. In fact, let me introduce you guys to him real quick. This is Taylor. Let's go.
Controller seems like pretty smooth. It's a little bit longer, so you kind of seem like you have more control compared to the Mavic 2 Pro. Oh, there's me. Whoops. Oh no.
Okay, so update. The drone is in this tree above me at the very top.
I don't know what it's about to do. What if I have a bunch of like stands and C-stands and stuff in my car? I wonder if it would make sense to like just connect a bunch of them or something.
Both footballs are stuck in the tree. I got one stuck and I threw the other one and it gets stuck. This is unbelievable. I can't believe this is happening.
He got it! It landed on the back, so hopefully the gimbal's fine.
Got the drone, headed back home. I'm so glad Taylor thought about that because it worked. What a day. Well, that was quite the adventure. I definitely did not expect all of that to happen when testing out the new Mavic Air 2, but I'm happy to report that it is here safe and sound and flies perfectly fine. But it's a really impressive drone, so let me tell you some of my favorite features about it. So first I wanted to talk about the build quality and the size of this little drone. This is it folded up. This is how big it is. So to give you a little bit of a comparison, this is how it looks to my Mavic Pro. So it's definitely much smaller, which is a big plus because when you're putting this in your bag, it's gonna take up a very small footprint. But I gotta mention, the only thing that I at first wasn't a fan of was this remote because of, again, the size difference. Here we have the Mavic Pro remote, and then here is the remote for the Mavic Air 2. So you can definitely tell there's a significant difference, but I gotta say that it feels a lot nicer. I was never a huge fan of how the Mavic Pro and the Mavic Pro 2 open up like this, and your phone slides right in here. The fact that it's just almost like a gaming remote is the best way I can explain it, and the phone goes on the top, feels really good. So it's just getting used to that big space. And also I really like that the fact that it goes up here, you can keep whatever phone case you have on there. Let me just put it on right here, even though I did in the video. So it can basically hold any size case. But along with that bigger size, you can actually fly longer distances away from the remote. Whenever I was testing this out in the park, we took a little bit of a distance, you know, even flying it around here for those sunset shots that you saw. So I think it is worth it having, if you can get used to this bigger remote, because, you know, there's nothing worse than accidentally losing signal and your drone is far away and then you have to basically get closer to it to hopefully it reconnects or kind of go over there and find it. So that's my only feedback about the remote, but it's definitely well worth it. So here's both drones opened up. Here's the Mavic Pro, here is the Mavic Air 2. This guy may feel really light, but after taking that fall from that tree, landing on its back perfectly fine is a reason why I think it is perfectly fine. I feel like if that was my drone, it would have just been done because it's just more weight added to it, and so I feel like that gimbal just would have broken or something. I can't believe that happened. I still can't believe all that whole mess happened, but the drone is fine, works great. We flew it a few times after that in the horizon, you know, still 100% level. The gimbal works really fine, responsive. So this thing is built like a tank, and honestly, at first impressions when I got it out of the box, I felt it was a little cheaper compared to like this one. So now talking about how it actually felt flying this drone, it honestly felt really nice. It is really easy to handle and it flies really responsive, almost like robotic is the best way I can put it. Like whenever you move the gimbal up and down, it's just kind of like panning, super nice. And whenever you go forward, left or right or up and down, it just feels like you have like a crane in the air or something like that. It just handles really, really nicely. And so I was really impressed by that, because I thought that being that this is a smaller drone, it was gonna maybe have like, you know, some jitters if there was like some wind in the air, or just, I thought it was gonna be kind of harder to control. But I can honestly say that it handled much better than my Mavic Pro. And so flying it and controlling it in a safe environment would have been 100% foolproof. Which brings me to another topic. I was kind of disappointed about the sensors. So I pulled up the information on the specs just to make sure that this stuff is accurate, and it does not have sensors left and right, which is a big mistake, because that is why we ended up crashing the drone. I found it really peculiar that whenever we were getting that shot, basically going from left to right, and there was no attempt by the drone to basically say, oh, you're about to run into something. And so now it kind of makes all the sense, but it's kind of surprising because I thought these were sensors, but now I know that those are not. And so that is one major bummer, I think, about that, because if it did have sensors left to right, it would have avoided all that mess. But at the same time, maybe we should have been flying it so confidently near the trees and stuff like that. So if you're in a controlled environment, I definitely don't recommend flying it around trees and stuff like that, because sometimes, of course, the sensors might fail. For example, these cannot see power lines. I've noticed that with most of my drones, unless it's like clearly visible, it's usually it might just get lost in the sky, like the little power line. So you have to be careful with stuff like that and thin branches, because sensors like that can fail and you can, you know, crash your drone. So always just make sure you have a clear line of sight, not just relying on the sensors. So now let's talk about how some of these new features perform in this drone. My favorite feature on this drone is the 4K 60. The 4K on here actually looks really nice. That was one of the things that I was really most impressed about, was the 4K image coming out of this, you know, this little sensor. And so upon looking at it on my phone when I was shooting it, and also like on my computer, definitely 4K 24 looked the nicest, along with 4K 60 still looked really good. And so we tested out 4K 60 right before we crashed the drone, and one of my favorite shots that I've honestly ever gotten on a drone was that one where Taylor was tracking me through the trees. It's really nice that you have the option to, you know, keep that at real time, but then slowing it down to get that slow motion in 4K, still looking really good. So the high-speed frame rates was pretty cool. I think 240 frames per second, honestly, is just shy of like a picture. Unless you're taking someone like, I think it's really meant for like action sports. Like if I were to be shooting like a BMX biker or someone doing or like a surfer, I think that's where that really high frame rates would come in really nicely. But for stuff like this, you know, every day, I thought I was going really fast on the one wheel whenever I was shooting that, and then I looked back at the footage and I thought I was like almost looking at a photo. It was going so slow, and the image quality definitely takes a hit. It was not the nicest quality image. So it's definitely a cool feature to have, you know, in case you're out shooting something really fast, where that would come in handy. But other than that, I don't think I would personally use those. I think 4K 60 is slow enough for, you know, everyday stuff that I would probably use the slow motion for, and the image is just a lot nicer. Another one of my favorite features with the drone is the fact that tracking mode is always enabled whenever you're in the app. Basically, whenever you're flying the drone, you can draw a box, a square, you just drag it over whatever your subject is that you want to track, and it works, you know, really, really nicely. I did that whenever I was testing the high frame rates. That was the last thing I tested. The only drawback is that it can't be done in any higher frame rates, so it only worked in 4K 24, which I imagine it would only work also in 1080p 24, maybe 30 frames per second. But it worked really nicely. Basically, it tries to keep whatever you're tracking in the center. All you have to control is up and down and how fast it's going. And so whenever I was on the one wheel, all I had to do was basically control the speed after I got it to the height that I was at, and it does the rest for you. So whenever I was going around the little bayou, which is like a big giant oval pretty much, it was doing its best to basically keep me in the center and tracking me. And so you can tell it messed up a couple times whenever I was going too fast, and then I would slow down, and that's where it was trying to keep me in the center. So it kind of did that like whip motion. So I was also really surprised that the app got a whole new look pretty much. One of the things that I guess doesn't make this as pro is that you can't really adjust some of your settings like on the fly really easily. There aren't any dials on the remote. The only one that you have is for the gimbal to pan up and down. And then here on the Mavic Pro, you have the same one for the gimbal to pan up and down, but then also right here, a dial for your shutter speed. You have to tap on the screen and change your shutter speed like that, which is kind of cool. It's not that big of a drawback, but then at the same time, I found my finger kind of like moving through the shutters way too fast. However, other than that, I did like the layout of the menus. Just wish it had a scrolly wheel. And lastly, the fact that they packed a 48 pixel image in this little camera is beyond impressive. I was really impressed because that's more megapixels than my camera, which is insane. So it's definitely really awesome seeing all these innovative features coming out, especially in drones and like cameras and stuff like that, because they're kind of pushing the limits. And so really nice to have. So that pretty much wraps up all my features that I wanted to talk about on the Mavic Air 2. And so now, do I think the Mavic Air 2 is worth it? And honestly, yes, 100% yes. I was so impressed, and I was honestly really skeptical when I first got this out of the box. Completely changed my mind because after what we went through with this drone, it handled incredibly. The image that comes out of it is super nice. The footprint is small and it's built like a tank. And so I definitely recommend this for anyone upgrading from maybe the Mavic Pro like me or the first Mavic Air. Definitely a big upgrade. So personally, I'm honestly debating if I should get the Mavic Air 2 and replace my Mavic Pro. I definitely love everything about it. I just wonder if the Mavic Pro 2 might be a better option. I gotta compare the two, but otherwise, I am extremely happy with the Mavic Air 2. Gonna be sending this guy back and, you know, might pick it up here in the near future because I think it's finally time to upgrade my drone. So leave a like if you enjoyed, comment down your thoughts on what you think of the Mavic Air 2. Do you think this is a drone that you're gonna get? Is it not worth it? I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, and subscribe if you haven't already. I would love for you guys to be a part of my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.